Well, welcome everybody. You're going to hear me talk a little bit about being customer-centric. I know that will have a whole new definition by the time I finish my talk. But you're my customers for the next 20 minutes. So can I get a show of hands who had heard of me before this event? Just put your hands up at your head. That's 82.45%. Must try harder. It's actually very complicated being slightly famous because you're not sure if people recognise you or not. And the day that I was knighted, I came out of Bunnings Warehouse with my father-in-law. That's very complicated because he's only 5 years older than me, so it's very complicated. And a builder walked towards us, and obviously he'd seen my picture in the paper, and he said, "Good on you, Sir Ray." And that's what we do in New Zealand. We're very, very familiar with each other. And I thought, this is brilliant, because from now on, everybody that I meet is going to call me Sir Ray, you see, so this is brilliant. Anyway, we get to the checkout counter, and the checkout chick tots it all up, and she says, "That'll be $127.27, sir." I thought, does she know, you know? But the problem with that story is that we don't communicate very well as a society. And one of the challenges that you face in this particular business is what I call an embedded system. In an unembedded system, you can make huge changes in society very easily. And mobile phone is probably a very good example of that. I can sell you a mobile phone with an app, and you can do anything you like with that. But as soon as you get a third party involved in regulatory controls, it starts to stymie innovation. You've got innovation happening, but you can't apply it because of the regulations. So if you believe actually that you're going to see driverless cars by 2020, it's not going to happen. Because reality is, by the time we work out who's going to pay the insurance if you have an accident, and how the computer decides which people are going to die in an accident scenario. So it takes a lot of technology and a lot of things to solve those problems. But one thing that's common is us. And understanding us is far more important than anything else. I build ferociously passionate teams of people that believe that they can change the world. And you guys can do that too, but you have to start to relearn everything. Because what happened with you poor buggers was when you went to school, they took all the innovation out of you. They sucked it out of you. As a 5-year-old kid, when you were at preschool, you could open all the drawers and play with things and put things together. And if you don't believe that young people are innovative, go and do a Google search for millionaires under the age of 5. They invent stuff because they play with stuff and they're allowed to. But of course, once you go to proper school, you get a uniform and you get unified. You get processed so that you acquire certain characteristics which actually don't make it very good for life later on in terms of building teams. The first thing we do is, of course, we standardise you, make a certain size package of education that fits for a certain size letterbox. What we do that's worse is we actually put a metric around that. The metric was originally imposed so we knew how you were going. But the metric now is a no-go gauge. So you get somebody who leaves school, they fail that exam and they'll discard it. But what's worse is indoctrination that subtly goes on amongst all of you. And I was blessed because I was brought up in London under the railway bridge, and I'd go to the Tate Art Gallery and have a look around. I would go to the museums, and I'd go every day and read the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. I didn't go to school. So my knowledge base is different, and I didn't get tainted. And it gave me one skill that I've got that I use every day to make game-changing technologies, which kids have naturally, but you've forgotten about, because you're actually more processed on something else. And that happens when somebody in your class gets a badge. They get a badge because they're successful. And you feel you have to be successful. So when you start in your new company, you're competing with all of the people around you. Instead of building teams, you're actually trying to show off. And that actually stops innovation from happening. Everybody in this room has the ability to be a natural innovator. And because innovation is not clever, it's just really simple stuff. It's you having the power of observation. And kids have that. That's how they learn 90% of their stuff, just by playing with stuff. They don't learn it from a book. In fact, the whole education system was predicated on the Industrial Revolution, where we needed lots of drones to go to factories and actually measure things and write things down. And that's not the society that's going to be a winning society for the future. We need innovators. So actually we need to put on the curriculum innovation, and companies need to actually put that on their board sheet. We want to be an innovative company, and that's what we do. We build innovative people. And we understand that the most important customer in our business is the people we work with. It's not an external organisation, it's the people we work with. So we spend a lot of time training them to get back to normal to this normal innovative state. I mean, when my 5-year-old daughter came back to me the other day in a park in Sydney, she ran up to me and she said, "This is my new best friend." I said, "What's her name?" She said, "I don't know," because she didn't know, because it didn't matter. But we all suffer from what I call the lift syndrome. You get in the lift with other people and you think, there's a mirror there, shit, I better not look at that. And you do anything except to engage with those people. So that is not a good communication society for innovation. But you all have that ability, and it's actually really simple. I'll give you a very practical example. All of the big inventions that occur in the world occur from one person seeing something that's there for everybody to see, and they see it and they act on it. And you're all capable of doing that if you start looking around. So this guy was a hunter in the Swiss Alps, and his dog came back to him, and it was all covered in these cockleburrs, these little seeds. And he pulled them off, and he looked at them under his child's microscope. There were these little hooks on them like that. He was the guy that invented Velcro. Just that one moment of observation. And it can be just doing your ordinary job, and you notice something that's happening. So there's a guy called Professor Percy. His name was very relevant because Professor Percy, his job was to detect submarines coming up the English Channel. And he made a thing called a magnetron. You've got one in your microwave. And it causes microwave signals to be shot out. But it also causes anything with water in it to vibrate those water molecules so quickly, creates friction, and it gets hot. Now, thankfully for you, you've got a big screen around your microwave oven. But he didn't. He had the mother of all magnetrons, naked, and he was firing things up the English Channel. And he suddenly noticed the Hershey bar in his pocket just started to boil, it was melting. And he had to pull it out, and it was all... And that's how the microwave oven was invented. He just put those two bits of information together. God knows what it was doing to his testicles at the same time. But all of you are capable of that one moment of observation and applying it. So the first thing is to be observant, okay? Leadership isn't about some guy on a white horse at the front. Leadership is about us, the power of us. What I know about us in this room, and that's why you need to talk to each other, is there's not one person in this room that's as clever as all of us. And that's what we do when we start our companies. If you join the company, it'll go something like this. The reason for this is that you probably spend more waking hours, more cognizant hours with the people that you work with than any other group of people. And if you still have that metric that you had at school where you are competing with them instead of working with them, then that company will fail. But if you change the dynamic and say, I spend more time with these people every day than I do with my family, so what if I treat them like my family? Because if you do that, you build an unassailable team of people. So if you join one of my businesses, I'll be at the table and say, I'm Dad, my job is to look after you guys. And your job is to look after each other. And if you think you're going to show off and get someone in this company by showing how clever you are against that person, what will happen is everybody else in the room will put their hand up and start singing like Superman. Shh, because you think you're Superman, but you're not. We are, and nobody can unassail us because we all act as one and we look after each other. And organisations like the All Blacks know that, so they pass the ball rather than trying to get an individual Guernsey for getting it across the line. So you've got to start thinking like that. The next thing is you really need to back it up. Really back it up. I know that I've got about 4,725 days left to live. That's all. You were all born with about 30,000 days. We're the only species on the planet that know we're going to die but does nothing about it. You just keep writing those checks. The problem we have is that if you don't have a plan, you're not going to be successful. If you started a business, what you would do is, if you're really smart, you think about what's the exit strategy for that business, because that will predicate how you drive that business and what sort of people you need around you. So if you're going to do an IPO, what you do is basically you don't need marketing people, you just need to get technology. But if you want to do a trade sale, you'll get marketing people involved in the business. You have a plan. You guys have got no plan with your lives. Your exit strategies are going to be the same as mine. You're going to bloody die. But for most of you, it will be a big bloody surprise. But what I can promise you is if you do have a plan, you'll be more successful than your contemporaries because they haven't got a plan. When you have a plan, you set objectives and you measure yourselves against those objectives. So that's what a good leader does. A good leader actually must know who they are and how they're going to change things. So that's the opportunity for you guys, is to talk to each other The other thing that we've got going for us in New Zealand is that we're quite different from the rest of the world. We're probably the most innovative country in the world. You don't know that because that's part of our education system. But we are. We've published a book about 3 years ago called The Power of Us, and we were going around New Zealand to try and find out what made us different. Is it that we've got number 8 fencing wire mentality and that's why we're innovative, or is it something else? Turns out it's something else. And there's 3 characteristics that define New Zealanders that separate us from the rest of the world, and they are the perfect opportunity for innovation. The first one is we're not fond of rules. Okay? Doubt that for a moment. Put your hand up, lads, if you've got a deck, we haven't got a permit for a fence, you know, there we go, the hands are up, look. We don't give a shit. In fact, I remember when I first arrived in New Zealand in 1973, I arrived at the International Arrivals Terminal at 4 a.m. in the morning because your air traffic controllers were on strike again, and there were these birds flying around in the rafters, they're still there today, and to mitigate that, there were these ladies wiping the poop off the tables ready for the morning rush, but also to mitigate it were 4 guys wearing swan dries and having air rifles shooting them. I thought, this is brilliant, this is a country for me. We've lost a little bit of that, but the reality is that we haven't lost it all. Who's a guy called Peter Beck? Anybody Peter Beck? Nobody, one person at the back. Peter Beck, he applied that first rule. He went down to Iraqi Gulf with a bit of funding from Michael Fay and put a rocket up into the stratosphere as a prelude to deploying satellites. Didn't have a permit. Did it 3 more times with no permit. Now he's got a permit and he's got a multi-million-dollar business. We actually have got a space race in New Zealand. You don't know it, but we've got more rocket scientists now per head of population than any other country in the world. He just came up with a new, novel way of mixing solid and liquid fuel together. And so that's the first characteristic. You can do anything. Nobody's going to stop you. That's the power of us. So if you all do it, you can make these game-changing leaps. You can tell the government what to do. You've got to know what you want to do and have a plan and get together and just do it, because you can. Nobody's going to stop you. That's the first thing that makes New Zealanders different. The second one is we've got no respect for the status quo. Just because we don't know how to do anything doesn't mean we don't have a go at it. You know, and so this leads me on to Peter Beck, what's his name? Bill Buckley. Who's heard of Bill Buckley? Probably only less than 2%. If you've got a mobile phone, you've been touched by Bill Buckley. He makes 90% of the electromagnets that fire up the chips, that dose the chips that make all of these displays work on every cell phone in the whole world. It's not a company in Silicon Valley, it's a company in South Auckland. We should know about these people and be very proud of these people because they change things. He's now making medical devices where we actually use photon displays to treat cancer patients, which is much safer than radiotherapy. And he did that. He's not a physicist, but he has that wonderful Kiwi notion of somebody asks him to do something, he says, okay, that's what you do. Okay, you know, and that's what we do. So we're not fond of rules, we have no respect for the status quo. And the next thing is that we dare to dream. This is the only country in the world that you can be anything that you want to be. Anybody under the age of probably 45 who's reasonably easy on the eye, can walk and talk at the same time, and don't go around pulling people's hair, could be Prime Minister. It's true. It's true. You think about it, you can. You can be anything you want. When I was living rafting under a railway bridge in London, I dreamt of becoming an owner of a bicycle shop. Now I head up an organisation that changes the lives of millions of people around the globe. None of that would have happened if I hadn't come to New Zealand, because it allowed me to be the person that I wanted to be, and I could. But I also had this magic wild card, and that's the power of us. There's always another guy in New Zealand who's got the next part of the story. Innovation always occurs at the edge of society, not in a compressed society. The old methodologies for innovation were big multinational companies that developed drugs and so on. Now those drug companies basically buy technology from university startup companies and deploy that. But it's little organisations and groups of people that change things. New Zealand actually is one of the most innovative countries in the world. You think about Peter Jackson doing 3 movies back to back. Nobody had ever done it. Every 3D movie you see in the world is embedded in better workshops. And that team building stuff is that other powerful thing. We shouldn't win the America's Cup. Demographically, we've only got 1 million able-bodied men to draw from. In Europe, they've got about 80 million. But we win. And of course, we've got any Australians here? Here we go. And when we beat you guys, remember when we beat you guys? No. You know what made me really happy when the final whistle was blown? We invented that whistle as well. And pretty much everything that you touch around the world has got a hand of a Kiwi in it. It's just we don't do that. We should educate. That's the first part of leadership. I'm ferociously proud to be a Kiwi, and you guys should be as well, because with that power of us, we can do anything we want to do. So I want you to start talking to each other and dreaming really, really big. It's just as easy to have a big dream as it is to have a little minor dream. So how could we change and revolutionise this whole business that you're involved in? Because you guys can do it. You just have to come up with a plan and then work together and look after each other, because one of the things that we use, a tool that we use, and you can do this with all of the people you work with, we don't lose anybody in our businesses because we make sure that they feel that they are part of the family. So every day, and I do this with my wife every time before we go to sleep, not what you're thinking, but basically we turn to each other and ask for 3 adjectives to describe that person's performance as a human being that day. And it's like an audit, it's an internal audit. And if you do that with the people that are your subordinates and the people that are above you, it's a great way of actually building that team that's unassailable. Because you've got responsibilities. You know, so if somebody's leaving my business, they'll say inspirational, clever, thoughtful. But if they say inspirational, clever and complex, I want them in the next morning to find out what that means. Because they're part of our team. So just remember, guys, you know, when I came to New Zealand, I became a Kiwi by osmosis. There was a guy called Frank who helped me to become a Kiwi. He lived across the road from me and he was helping me dig out my basement. And basically I got a Kango hammer, drilled it into the mountain and it got stuck and I couldn't get it out. So I kept getting more and more Kango hammers and drilling them in, and I ended up paying, I think, $47 a day for sculptures. I couldn't get them out. Thankfully I got one of those big green pneumatic things and he came over and he said, "What are you trying to do?" So I'm trying to dig out the basement, put it in a 4-car garage. He said, "You won't do it like that, mate." And he said, "Come and look at my place, I'll show you my place." And when we went across this place, it was like a whole square of butter had been removed from the mountain. And there was no tool marks. I said, "How did you do that?" He said, "Dynamite." He said, I said, "Isn't that dangerous?" He said, "No, a few floorboards popped up, nails popped up, Mum complained about slippers getting scuffed, banged them down, all sweet, I'll do your place." And that's what Kiwis are like. That's what they're actually like. So be proud of being a Kiwi. Remember those 3 characteristics that all of us have got. Because right now there are billions of people around the world who are using our technology. And I think that we could lead the world in biosecurity just by you guys stepping up and taking your role in leadership and having an imagination and taking that observation power and finding out new cunning ways of doing things that nobody else has thought of, because you're all capable of doing that. Remember who you are. You're New Zealanders. You have no respect for the status quo. You're certainly not fond of rules. And you change things. You develop technologies which make the world a better place. Thank you very much.